Good morning. I'm glad you joined our conversation today. I'm going to be talking a bit about the schoolyard bully. With school starting soon, or maybe having started already in your area, this is something that is on many people's mind. Parents are concerned as well as teachers, and we want to see how we can approach it in a way that can be helpful. Before I do that, I want to say something that when I watch YouTube, often I will watch for a little while, and if it's not something new to me or it's not particularly interesting or I want to watch later, I just move on. It will be helpful to the presenter and to others that I know if I could just like it and subscribe. It does help the algorithm so that more people will be reached. So if you find that it's not for you right now, but maybe it's for someone you know, or maybe one of your children's teachers, not that they will need the information, but that they can refer families who do and who will benefit from it. So if you would just give me a like, that would help me. Thank you so much. Now let's get to the bullies. First of all, let's understand who that bully is. A bully is most likely a victim of bullying, and it usually comes from home, but not always. But bullies tend to raise bullies, and it goes on for generations. I remember saying to my clients that let it stop in this generation. If, as I'm speaking, you think your child might be the bully or bully at some times, or your child is being picked on at school, maybe if we understand it a little better, we can address it personally in your family. First of all, a bully is motivated by fear, and that fear comes from not being accepted or being rejected. Now, it's an interesting thing being rejected, and I think probably all of us have been rejected at some point. Maybe a good friend said they don't want to be friends anymore. Maybe we're not invited to the party. Maybe people ignore us or don't include us. That can be very hurtful. And sometimes we're surprised at our reaction or our response to that because it seems to be sometimes such a deep hurt. Maybe we don't understand that. But rejection is a primal behavior. And when the human race was young, it was a way of casting somebody out who would surely die. We are social people, we're communal people, and most of us can't live alone. And so in the early days of humanity, to be cast out or to be shunned would mean certain death. Today, if we're not invited to the party, or our best friend betrays us and stops speaking to us, or a family member no longer wants to be in relationship with us, we feel that primal fear of death. Now, in our reasoning, we know that if we don't get invited to the party or if we're left out, we're not going to die. But sometimes the feeling still feels like that, and we don't reason it in our head. The pain can be very, very torturous. So when we look at the schoolyard bully or any bully, we have to understand that to not be accepted, to not be a part, is very, very painful. And in order to confront this pain or to prevent the pain, the bully has learned to try to take power over the other person. I'm going to be overpowering you so that you cannot reject me. Now, that doesn't really work. It works if we let it work. If we don't understand and we believe what the bully says to us or about us, or we believe there's a threat. If we understand that the bully is only projecting onto your child at school what they themselves think about themselves. The bully is only saying and doing things to them that the bully is most afraid of. We often think that the kids at school who are struggling, that maybe don't feel like they're the smartest, or they think they're ugly, or other kids have told them they're ugly or they're stupid or they're dumb or whatever children say, that if your child hears that and believes it, then they're going to feel very bad, and the bully will have overpowered them. However, if your child understands that what the bully does and says has nothing to do with them, it only is an expression of how the bully feels about themselves. And the worse they feel, the more urgent it is for them to get power over your child. So, how do we deal with this? We have to understand that even though the bully is hurtful, the real problem with them is that they're hurting. They've been treated the way they're treating others. That's what they know. So talking to them reasonably generally isn't going to cut it. It's just not going to change the situation. And bullying, the longer it goes on, stronger it gets. It evolves into something that by high school can be very cruel and very hurtful, even life-threatening. When your child is young, it's the best time to introduce them to this issue. When they're in high school, it may already have gotten out of hand to some extent. One of the things your child can do, and you can help your child, is to find something good about the person who's picking on them and acknowledge that, or just do some kindness that will help them to think they're included, or to think they're liked, or that someone noticed them. So it can be some small things like sharing a pencil, sharing a cookie at lunch, asking to sit near you, just saying good morning, giving them cut in line, some act of kindness that makes them feel valuable, helps them to be seen, to be acknowledged, to call them by their name, to say hello to them. Just really acknowledge that they're there and they're a good person. The bully may not know how to respond to this, and they may come back with something mean. But your child really needs to hear that it's not about you. It's about them. And it's about them hurting. So if your child returns insults or calls mean names back to them, it's only going to escalate. It's not going to help matters. We don't want our children to escalate it. As this moves into high school, it can get worse. And we know how online bullying is. I think there are ways to deal with that, but I think it would be better for us to look at online bullying when we do some things about just talking about cell phones and social media. I think it's too much to deal with right now with this episode. In school, sometimes the bully is the one in the classroom that causes most disturbance and trying to get attention, and I think sometimes if we can single that person out, not as the disruptor and the person who's ruining everything, and give them some kind of a position of importance so that they can feel important in a legitimate way, it can be helpful. One example I can give is when I was new teacher and didn't really have a position yet, and did like a 4-month substitute position. And when I came into the class, the teacher and the principal told me to be careful about a boy I'll call Ronnie. Be careful of Ronnie. He's very, very noisy. He disrupts class all the time. He's constantly tormenting the other kids, and he will just ruin your class. And I thought, here I am, a new teacher. I didn't have a lot of experience, just my student teaching. And I thought, oh dear, I don't know how I'm going to be able to handle this. And the first day, he was exactly as he had predicted, constantly jumping around, pushing other kids' stuff off their desk, just being terribly annoying. And so after school, I asked him if he would stay after school for a few minutes, which is not unusual for him. And it was an urban school neighborhood, so most of the kids walked home, so I wasn't keeping him from the bus or anything like that. I told him that since I was a substitute and really didn't know the class that well and didn't know the curriculum that well, that I was going to need some help. And I wondered if he would be my co-teacher. And he looked at me like he was shocked. And he said, "What would I do?" And I said, "Well, I want you to help me watch the class. And if you see that somebody needs some help or you see that something's not quite right, if you would get up from your seat and go fix it and come back and sit down quietly." And he was just amazed that I asked him to do that. And I'm telling you, it worked a miracle because it gave him reasons to get up out of his seat. It gave him reasons to be quiet and watch what the other kids were doing. And it also brought out something in him that I was very surprised because I didn't expect it at all. But I found underneath there was a real intelligence. And this is often the case with kids who are disruptive. Sometimes they are just bored. Being annoying and bothering everybody and constantly getting attention is a way for them to express themselves. And so I use that in other situations in classroom where I would find the one that was the most disruptive or was even mean and ask them to be my co-teacher or my assistant. It became a position of power for them. He had some could do some directing and he had a direction and it really helped. I think that if any way we can work with the kid who's the disturbance or the one who's threatening, if we can help them to have a position of power that will produce something and produce a good behavior that's complementary, and that helps build their self-esteem. And then they move to a place where even if they don't have some special assignment or a label or they hold on to that self-importance. I'm important. Everybody likes me. So I think that's one thing that's important for bullies. Another way is to help our children to stand up for themselves. But I think sometimes parents, take an aggressive side. If you need to be tougher than the person who's picking on you. You need to say something mean back. You have to get involved. You have to be a good fighter. And I don't think that's the way to go. If children do not have that instinct that they want to fight all the time, it's not really good for them. It doesn't help their self-esteem. But I also think we need to help children to give them words to say and tell them what to say and how to say it. Now, I'll give you a small example, which I think really worked for me. And that was when I was with my grandchild, who was 4 years old. And we went to a indoor play place called Jungle Java. And I don't know if you have one in your town or if you ever did, but it was like a 2-story play stage. And to get upstairs, there were big steps. And I couldn't do them because at the time I was preparing for knee surgery and I could never have done those stairs. And so I asked an older girl, about 10 years old, if she would take my granddaughter up to the second level so she could go down the big slide. And she did. And of course, I'm drinking coffee because that's what the parents do when you're at Jungle Java. The kids go to the jungle and the parents drink coffee. So I'm drinking coffee and I look up to the second level And she's standing there crying, and I thought, "Oh, dear, what's going on?" So I'm kinda watching, and nobody's around her, but she's just standing there crying and looking at me. But she's far away, I can't talk to her, and, so I motioned for her to come down, and she did, and, she slid down the slide, and she came over, and I said, "What is wrong?" And she said, "There's real mean boys up there, Mimi, and they keep pushing me and hurting me. They're pushing me out of the way." And I said, "Oh my gosh, I can't come up there and talk to them because I can't get up there." So I said, "Well, here's what you need to do. I want you to stand up real tall. Show me how tall you can stand." And of course she did. And I said, "Now put your hands on your hips." And she did. And I said, "And I want to hear you say this. Stop. It's my turn, and I don't want you to push me out of the way." And she said, "I can't say that to them." And I said, "Yes, you can. You can. You do it. You go up there and try it and see what happens." So I watched her and had another older girl take her up, and I'm watching up there, and here comes the boys. And they were like 8 and 9 years old, so they were bigger than her. And they were all friends, so they were rough and tumble and having fun. And so I saw her, and I saw one of the boys just pushed her out of the way because she was in the way. I saw her stand tall and put her hands on her hips, and I heard her yell, "Stop!" And they stopped. And she said, "It's my turn, and don't push me." And one boy walked over to her, and he put his arm around her, and he says, "Oh, I'm sorry. I didn't see you." And then they all moved back, and she took her turn. So I watched a couple of times as they did this, and they helped her up the steps, and they were very kind and fun with her, and she became part of their group. And I thought, I wonder if we do take the time sometimes to say, "Hey, here's what you need to say. Let's practice it." And give them words, because for these little kids, elementary kids, this is their first time. They haven't had these experiences. Teach them to stand up for themselves in a way that will change the situation and will help them keep power over themselves so the other kids don't take power. We can do that same thing at different stages. It's like, make sure your child can speak assertively and not be mean and say, "This is what I want. And if I don't get it, this is what's going to happen." Pretty soon, they will learn that. And that's a skill that will be important for the rest of their life. Just to be assertive, which is not the same as aggressive. Assertive always assumes the dignity of the other person, but you express what you want. You're very clear, and then you say what you're going to do if they don't follow through. So we would have to work on maybe what she would have done had they not complied, and if they would not had recognized her. So I think bullying is about helping the person who's picking on others to feel good about themselves, not to be afraid that they're going to be rejected, and somehow welcome them into the group. That's a lot for us to do, but I think if it starts at home, it will happen at school. So thank you for joining me, and please like and share and maybe subscribe. And no matter what happens, be kind to others.